Hello, good morning, everyone. You've made
Hello.
it. You're the early bird crowd.
Woo!
Congratulations.
Give yourself a round of applause. You have done well. You have wake up early.
You will have a
Yay.
lot more energy than me right now. So thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of Lightning Talks. We have some fantastic speakers who volunteered also to get up really early with you all today. So if I can go ahead and get our first speaker to come on up. And just some announcements again. So tomorrow, what are we going to be doing for conference and meetup organizers in our
So-
Lightning Talks?
If you have any community-run conference or meetup or event, just if you want to promote it in the big crowd, so please send Lorena.
Yep.
What's your email?
Lorena@python.org.
Send a picture, so you will get 1 slice and 1 minute to promote it.
Yep, and that'll be during tomorrow morning's Lightning Talks. Some other things just to plug. Again, we have a code of conduct. Please make sure to adhere to it. We really like to make this a safe and inclusive space. And for our speakers, how long do they have to speak?
They have 5 minutes, and because they will have the clock, but we can also give them a hint by when it's 30 minutes left, we will do a slightly tap, which is like very gentle, very small. Then we can increase it until if they have to finish the sentence, we'll give them a big round of applause to thank them.
And I think that's it, unless if there's anything else before we jump into our first morning talk.
Yeah, we should, get started.
No, yeah, I think that sounds great. Oh, and of course, Pie Ladies auction is later today. It's awesome. I'm guessing it's already sold out, but go support Pie Ladies. You can make a donation. They're in the expo hall. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, Jeremy.
Thank you. Hi. My name is Jeremy Schulman. I am a senior director at Major League Baseball, and we focus primarily on solution engineering software, integrating and automating network infrastructure and other ballpark types of infrastructure. So today I'm going to talk about how to build colorful structured tables in Slack. I've been programming in Python for about 10 years and building Slack applications or bots for about 4 years. I'm going to talk about what are structured tables, why are they important, and show you some code samples on how to do it. And this is something I wish I had known getting started. So this is an example of what I mean. When we have messages going into Slack, we want to provide our users very nice, pretty tables that are colored to give them very good visual cues and orient the data in a way that they are wanting to see. And in this case, I'm showing rack power usage. So we have racks at the ballparks. They have two power distribution units per rack. And we're collecting in real time the information about power. We're putting the outlets together so we can see kind of A and B plugs for our infrastructure and how they relate to one another. And you can kind of see we're colorizing it in a way where we're getting striations. And then we want to highlight certain fields, like if there's no power, we want to show them in red. Another example is showing the game day schedule. So our operations team needs to know when games are happening and when they're going to start. So in our chat ops system, they can say, what's our schedule? And you can kind of see this tabular information where it shows each of the games, when they start, where they're playing, and the state of the game. So if it's in progress, you can kind of see that it's green. So these are kind of examples of what I mean by colorful structured tables. And Slack doesn't support this natively, and I don't think any of the chat systems support doing this kind of formatting natively. And so the technique really is to build these tables, convert them into a picture, and then upload them to the system into Slack. So I'm going to show you some code how I do that. This is a Python function that's getting a request from Slack. I'm using their async bolt framework. And this part of it, I'm really just using today's date to get the API, to call this the MLB stats API so that we can get the game day data. So this is kind of just getting the data, and of course, if there are no games, it'll just say no games. Now, once I have the data, what we're going to do is we're going to turn that into a table. Now, I'm using the Rich library package. It's awesome, so thank you to the maintainer for Rich. It's incredible. And that produces the table that you see on line 69, and then starting on line 72, this is where we actually create the table as an image. We render it into a file, and then we upload that file to Slack. So this is kind of the little bits and pieces of how you actually do that. Now I'm going to go into details of the table image. The table image is really just taking that table structure, and we're using the rich console. We're going to flow that table through the rich console so that we can measure the size of the table so that we can, have the size of the image, kind of cropped. So we do that, and then on line 145 and 146, what we're doing is we're telling the rich console the size of that table and now to record the data so that we can actually export that data into an image. So we do that. And then I'm subclassing from a console image class here, which is the base class if I want to do any type of console imaging, like if I wanted to take a CLI snapshot, just the output of a show command of a switch, so this is kind of a reusable component. And this is really the meat and potatoes of how this works. Rich console will allow you to export SVG. So we do that right here, and then we convert that into an image file. Now here I'm using ImageMagick and the convert utility. So I'm just kind of running that through a temporary directory and a sub-process. And I'm using async IO here. I'm running it as in an executor because I'm using the standard Pythonic library for temporary directories. I'm not using AIO files. But that's how that works. This is the cleanup. And these are the packages that I used. So for Slack applications, it was the SDK and Bolt from the Slack company, rich tables, ImageMagick to do the conversion, and Inkscape for kind of smoothing out the tables. That is my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. We can have a coffee and then warm up with some Python code, which is amazing. So next, we'll have another lightning talk about worker bees. Ooh, are they honeybees or are they what bee of are they? So please listen to the lightning talk by Mario. Thank you.
Good morning. Are you a fly on the wall or a worker bee? Ned's keynote yesterday got me thinking about my role in community. Am I a fly or a bee? Now, a fly on the wall, it's very good at observing things from multiple perspectives, and it's very good at absorbing all that information, having a big macro level view of things. Also, flies are very good at retreating whenever they're intimidated. They kind of run away, but they usually return to a vantage point, whether the same place or a little different, but they take in a lot of information. Now, a bee, on the other hand, they feel most at home with other bees. They're very social animals. They like to keep busy. Whether they're gathering food or, just like dancing. Okay, maybe I'm not a bee. They're gentle. This is a little known fact of bees. They're gentle creatures. And the reason for this is if they use their stinger, they would die, so they'd rather just carry on with their business. Now, how can you know if you're a fly? One of the ways I know is when I pick up a meal at the expo hall, I usually look for a table that's kind of empty or not too many people. Or if someone talks to me or waves at me, I tend to think they're talking to someone else. Or most of all, like if your heart is pounding rapidly and mercilessly at the mere thought of doing a lightning talk, you might be a fly. Now, a bee, on the other hand, they look at an empty seat at a table and they think that's a direct invitation. A bee might wave at people they barely recognize or think they might have seen 10 years ago and they're waving at you. They might have 2 or 3 lightning talks on their back pocket in development or ready to go at any given moment. Those are bees. Now, which one of these am I? Let's take a look at last year when I came to my very first PyCon. I came to a very open, empty registration area. It was wonderful. I was literally on the wall in the back of a room. One of the first places I visited was the quiet room, a lovely place. And here's a terrible picture of food I was eating at an empty table. But then something happened. All of a sudden, I met new friends and other wonderful people from the Python community. I played some games, I met some more awesome people, and before I knew it, it was all done. It was just, a whirlwind. And next thing you know, it was 2023. So what happened in 2023? Well, it all started when my talk was accepted, so that was pretty great. You can catch that later today at 5 p.m. But not only that, I also presented a 3-hour tutorial earlier this week on Wednesday. I volunteered to set up the back-end configuration for the Hubelo platform. I became a bona fide booth fairy and helped set up the super awesome PSF booth in the expo hall, and I met a mysterious ghost. Actually, I'm pretty sure that was Georgie. I'm pretty sure. I also met a slew of awesome people I mostly know online or are great people in the community. I got to see not one, but 2 of my favorite podcasts live. I had an $11 espresso. It was worth it. Think of it as nectar. And I'll be hosting an open space at 1 p.m. later on Fast API, HTMX, Tailwind. Come check it out. And like I mentioned, my talk tonight, and of course the obligatory selfie that went away. So am I a fly or a bee? My inclination is usually to stand back and observe, to really take things in. That's usually the tactic I take. But you can see that maybe here at PyCon things have changed a little bit. I know it sometimes feels like these 2 different kinds of people are sometimes at odds. I'm not here to tell you that you should be one or the other. I have sympathy and empathy for both. If you're here at PyCon, you should already know that it shouldn't be fly or bee, fly versus bee. I think this is more the mood that we're in. If you are a fly and you're in the wall and observing, awesome. Now, if you want to try to transform a little bit more into a bee, maybe come talk to me afterwards. I have some notes. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario. I am very, very impressed by people who can teach 3-hour tutorials. I think I can speak like 90 minutes in a row. Or you all, when we're doing the Pilates auction tonight, after that, I can't speak that much longer. That being said, yet another plug for Pilates auction. It's fantastic. Again, go sponsor Pilates. We would love your support. Our next speaker, I think, has something that we can all connect with. I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to our next speaker, Juan.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I am your fellow Python attendee. So we all required to wear masks. And if you're like me, it's get uncomfortable after 8 hours wearing masks. So I think of this little device that I call ear saver. I don't actually know what to call it because COVID wasn't there when I learned English. So this is something I made up. If you know the name, let me know. And well. So the first step for you to find a used cup, because most of the cup that you see here in the conference is one-time use, and I think the cup will be happy to have a second purpose that come back to our society and help us. So find a used cup and cut off the top and the bottom of the cup, and then you will have the piece of plastic here. It's a piece of plastic. And make sure that the plastic is shorter than your ear, because otherwise, if it's too long, it will push the back of our ear and then defeat the purpose of getting comfort to our ear. And then cut to have a knock onto the plastic, so we can put it on. And so, but the first step is how you cut the plastic. Where did you find a scissor? You can ask the information desk. They have one yesterday when I asked, and you can ask your hotel desk as well. You can buy one from Walgreens, which is like 200 feet from here in the corner. You can look for me. And PyCon, if you see me and come to me, I will help you cut your ear saver. Also, PAC booth, I don't know if they have scissor, but someone told me they have a really comfortable mask, so stop by and ask them to give you one. So come look for me. My name is Quang, and I hope you enjoy PyCon.
Thank you, Gwen. And I think it's really useful tip, right? We always talk about the technology, how we code stuff, but this is, human technology. You can use your 10 fingers and then make something to help yourself. It's very cool. So our next speaker, Lorraine, will be talking about some challenges and opportunity in Python Meetups. So the stage is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My name is Lauren Olja, and I'm a data scientist, and this is my very first PyCon. I want to share my understanding of how meetups and user groups adapted during the pandemic, what lessons we can take forward, and how the landscape has changed as we resume in-person meetups. For those who aren't familiar with local tech meetups, I do literally mean that you can find community-led groups of like-minded Python enthusiasts on meetup.com. And so here's two that I am involved with. If you can't find a group near you, maybe you can start one. And if there's one near you, maybe you'll be interested in volunteering and helping organizing, or at least attending. So I should give a quick caveat that my viewpoint is, in fact, very New York City-centric, based on my involvement in the tech meetup scene there since 2017. And I am under the impression that New York may be unique in the meetup scene has been slower to resume in-person events compared to elsewhere, due to challenges largely securing sponsorship space. So during the pandemic, meetups went virtual in a big way. This all seems obvious in retrospect, but at the time, organizers really had to figure it out. So NYC Python moved our weekly project nights to Discord for synchronous remote gathering. We used Zoom for monthly lightning talk events, live streaming directly to YouTube. And because we had mostly figured this out, this opened new opportunities to do brand new event types. And one such event that I'm particularly proud of facilitating was a demo day for boot camp final projects. Now, pre-pandemic, these students would have presented in front of employers in person, but when boot camps went virtual, their final project presentations were simply recorded and put online. Was anyone even seeing them? And as a career changer myself, I knew how important it was to have that very first experience where other folks saw your work and called you for the first time, oh, you're a data scientist. And I was certain that we could pull together such an audience through the meetup, plus we could use Zoom breakout groups to approximate networking. And the best part was that this event came together because of 3 new organizers. They were attendees of the meetup, recent bootcamp grads themselves. NYC Python provided the resources and experience, creating this leadership opportunity, while giving new organizers something valuable they could give their peers, an opportunity to share their first technical talk. So virtual events and spaces are likely here to stay. They have a lot of advantages. They don't require sponsorship. They can be easier to record for asynchronous viewing. They can attract attendees from outside your immediate area. They're just generally more accessible for folks for whatever reason they can't attend in person. But people also love in-person events. While we're all here co-located at PyCon US, occupying the same physical space helps build that sense of community. And so whereas Zoom can sometimes feel draining, going out and seeing familiar faces can be rejuvenating, like hanging out with friends. But returning to in-person events turns out to be really hard. Remote work has untethered us from physical space. And now many folks in tech, including myself, moved outside the city or just don't need to be in the office during the day. And this affects both organizers and sponsors. And yet, we have a very clear build it and they will come scenario on our hands. For the in-person events that I've been involved with this year, we've seen attendance rates of about 40%. This represents how many people RSVP yes to a free event with no consequences for not coming. And historically, this number hovered pre-pandemic between 25 and 40%. So where do we go from here? I'd love to hear from other meetup organizers, but here's some ideas from me, such as teaming up to share venues with other community meetups, continuing to nurture your virtual spaces and events, recruiting new speakers and new organizers with inclusivity in mind. And if you're hiring, there are meetups out there that would be thrilled to introduce you to their developer communities in exchange for venue space. Or if you'd rather sponsor pizza, reach out and let your local meetups know. These are uncertain times, so try to reduce uncertainty on your end, please, before any real event planning and marketing takes place. And finally, the best way to support your local meetup group is by getting involved. Attend, speak, organize is a great way to meet people, and you can build those elusive soft skills that are so important in a semi-professional, non-work environment. So again, my name is Lauren Olja. If this talk resonated with you or you saw yourself somewhere in the last 3 slides, I would love to chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As an organizer, I really appreciate hearing lived lessons that other organizers have, so I really appreciate that. Up next, we have Ryan, who's going to be talking to us about better exceptions using data classes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Miller-Galam. I'm going to be teaching you about a crazy idea that I've not really seen much elsewhere, but I've been doing a lot in my own code, and it's been extremely helpful and useful. So here we go. Better exceptions using data classes. It helps make your tests more testable, or your exceptions more testable, and also more useful to whoever's catching it. So how most exceptions look is something like this. I'm going to start with an example of a function that raises an exception. This is going to be a silly little function that eats some food as a string, because that makes sense. But it's a picky eater, because if we feed it spam, it freaks out and raises an I don't like it exception, saying I don't like spam. Otherwise, it continues on. I know it's kind of hard to see with the syntax highlighting there, but yeah, it just goes, does whatever it does to eat the food, because I don't know how to do that. So here is the function in all its glory. And now here is a basic exception. Honestly, this is better than what you'll often see, because it's actually a special exception subclass, because most people, or oftentimes people just raise an exception and call it a day. I've done it too, no judgment there, it's fine, but we can do better. So here is a test that tests our eat food function. It tests that it should reject spam. By the way, I like to use the double underscores between the subject of my test and the behavior that I'm testing. I find that it makes test suites easier to skim, but that's not what this talk is about. It's just a compulsion of mine, but in case that's distracting you, that's what's happening. So let's look at how we would test this using PyTest. So we enter a PyTest.raises context, passing in the expected exception, and then a match regular expression for it, which in this case is just the string. Oftentimes you'll have to wrap it in re.escape if you've got any regular expression characters, but not in this case. And then we call whatever it's supposed to do, whatever is supposed to raise the exception. So pretty normal stuff, but let's talk about why that's not ideal and how we can do better now. So good tests, among other things, and more or less, there's a lot of it depends here, but good tests often test a single behavior. Sometimes people will say good tests should only have a single assert. I don't know about that, but a single behavior I think is a pretty safe convention to follow. And then they only need to change when the behavior under test changes, and also good tests are trivially correct. You should be able to tell at a glance that the test is doing what it's supposed to be doing, because you don't have tests for your tests. Otherwise, you would never stop writing tests. So let's look at the test again. It's got a few issues. It's using string parsing, regular expressions, to test the data in it. And it's also mixing the testing of the formatting and the testing of the actual data that we care about, because the data is trapped in the string, which is part of why the tests, or these exceptions, aren't really usable. If you try to accept or catch one of those exceptions, you have to parse the string in order to figure out how you can handle that in your own code, or just kind of give up and let it crash, which is not great. So here's some better exceptions. So at its core, it's the same exception, but it's a data class now, and it has the data that we care about as an attribute on the data class. And then the error message is rendered in the dunder string method. It's got an f string, pretty simple, the same exact error message. Here it is all together. And here is the exception now, which it actually reads a little bit better in my opinion, because you can actually see this is the data that we care about, rather than having to format the string outside of the exception. So that's great. Right there, and right there. So now here is a test, same test. We have entered the PyTest.raises context, and this time we're catching the exception info as exception info. We call the eat food function, and now all we have to do is just do assert the exception info.value equals whatever it is we want that exception to be, because the data classes brings equality checks and the attributes with it, which is really nice. So our tests are only focused on the data. Oh, are we done? Oh, okay, cool. Thanks, sorry. But yeah, that's the idea. Thanks, I'm Ryan Miller-Glam. Bye.
Thank you so much. And I also don't like spam, so I really can understand. So our next speaker is Robert. And oh, I can see the screen is ready. So how about we just get started?
Okay, so I do not have slides. I am one of those flies who saw lightning talks as like bright, shiny light, and now I'm wondering what I got myself into. But this conversation, well, this arises from a conversation I had with a bounty hunter years ago. I was like, oh, you're a bounty hunter, cool, that must be exciting. He's like, well, actually, I'm an intern, and I spend most of my time looking through public records. And I'm like, huh. You know, I do family history. I spend a lot of time looking through public records, too. And I've never been satisfied with the tools for organizing that information. And so what I'm going to do, here, you'll remind me if I get anywhere close, is to cover 3 excellent tools in Python for organizing information and hopefully start some conversations after this. Okay, so something, you know, I do web in my day job, and we work with relational databases all the time. And so I'm going to start with just creating a database here, and we're going to look at this and say, okay, we'll use names as an example of the problems that you face with records. And we're going to make this SQLite database. And okay, we need, oh, excuse me. Okay, and so we've got our first name, and we've got our last name. And since I'm doing family history, I have some ancestors that came out of Sweden. And so I'm like, okay, well, patronymic was usually the last name, but sometimes not. And sometimes people change their names. So I'm going to quit here and say, okay, let's start putting in some data here. Pretty standard stuff. And the problem that I come up against is I've got this hole right here, a null. And you know, if the record said, okay, we want a patronymic, I would say, oh yeah, I know I'm going to look out there somewhere and I'm going to find this. But maybe somebody just said, well, okay, you know, that's my last name anyway, I'm going to put this in here. And so the problem is every public record has its own schema. And when you're dealing with lots of public records, things get messy fast. And you want, if you're in a relational database, you don't want to have loads of schemas, like a new schema for every single record you're putting in. Okay, well, let's save that. SQLite is great. Visitdata is great. Highly recommend those tools, by the way. All right, so we can try something that's a little different and built into Python, and that is the shelf module or package. So I'm going to just open that up and give you an example. It says, well, okay, so now I have a comment here that says this is how Gramps approaches its data. This is the idea of how it goes. And Gramps is a Python package desktop-based, that is genealogical software. Really cool. And anyways, so here's our shelf package. Here's our record. We can put in any Python object we want. And so here I can say, well, here's what I got out of the record. Great. I don't have to put any null spots unless they were on the record. Say, hey, I had a blank field. And then I can just say, hey, shelf open, and put our record in there. And now we're at the, we can save that out. And I'm going to run this just for sake of. And now we've got our name shelf sitting there. And really, it's a pickle jar under the covers. And then you can go and look up these different pieces. Okay, so that's example number 2. And I think I've got just enough time to introduce example number 3. So Tim Berners-Lee, World Wide Web fame, still working on stuff. And I ran across this technology called RDF. And I'm just going to show you from the web, because this is the part that I want to dig into and see if this could be a good tool in the future. I am getting close to time. So RDF deals with a subject, predicate, object. And the idea is that you can also have the power of querying against a triple store there. And so you can have those pieces. Thank you.
Major respect for no slides. I cannot do that. Major respect. Up next, we have Calvin.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to attempt a live demo here. That's why I'm going to do this really quickly. I want to show everyone there's nothing on my computer in the desktop folder. We're going to actually use Cookie Cutter, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm actually doing when I get this actually started, because there's some time involved and some things that got to happen, and some stuff that's got to be downloaded, and I'm doing this all over my cell phone, and it should be a lot of fun. Okay, success. So now we're going to go into that directory. I just made a Django project called My Awesome Project, and I'm going to do a make compile in here, and this will all become clear what the heck is actually going on. So there's stuff going on behind the scenes there where it's downloading some packages. I'm going to show you how to go 0 to live code changes in Kubernetes in under 5 minutes, because it's really cool to do that live in front of a big audience of people. So I'm going to actually launch a PyCharm, if I can get type. There we go. And show you the directory structure that's going on here. So I'm launching directly into PyCharm. We're going to open up the, oh my goodness, what happened here? Where am I at? It launched an ancient PyCharm. Uh-oh. Desktop, my awesome project. That was not planned. Trust. Okay, so we're actually here inside this project. The structure is all set up in here. We've got a full Kubernetes set of manifests. We've got Scaffold that's going to be doing a lot of the work for us. We have a back-end project and we have a front-end project. So there's a React and a Django project both in here. And that make compile just took our pip tools, compile, hashed all the things so we can have a repeatable set of containers that we can actually deploy. Right now it's actually going through and computing all the hashes so we can actually build the containers. I'm going to do that live on stage here. Nothing has been pre-computed. There may be some things cached on my disk to help with my cell phone data storage situation, because if you know if you're doing Kubernetes, this could be kind of tricky. But the really cool part about all this is really the developer experience. I've become really obsessed with making the developer experience a super easy process for people to get going. I would love for everyone to get a blank laptop and be able to start developing within an hour and actually submit code changes to production, to a pull request, let's say, to go into production in that time frame to make developers even more productive. But a lot of times the setup is so hard for developers to get going, especially if you're adding in Kubernetes in the mix. And especially if the internet is being slow. Come on, go, little guy, you can do this. Because there's one more step after this, which I spin up Kubernetes. You'll see right now I'm using Docker Desktop. There are no Kubernetes containers currently running yet in this whole setup. There we go. All right, perfect. Now, the last step, we're going to use a tool called Scaffold and run dev. And this is actually going to build the containers on the fly. It's actually spinning up a Postgres instance, a Redis instance, a Mail Hog instance, and they're all, you can see them kind of happening here in real time. You can see the instances are spinning up now in Kubernetes, and if I go over and look at this, I've got the Django UI. You'll notice this localhost 8000, so just like as if you were doing local development like any normal place, like if you were doing on your own file system. And then here's the React project, and I'm going to make a live code change. So if we go over here and go to base.html, and we'll go to, oh boy. This is all, I'm launched an alternate reality here, unfortunately. Hello, PyCon. We got plenty of time. What is going on? So everything's running. Let's go back over here to Django. We'll refresh this page. Hello, PyCon. And now the really cool part is I'm going to pull open this and actually open up that home. And you'll see that in this window over on the side, as it's saving, it's auto reloading. And force a save there. There it is, hello PyCon. I've gone fully into remote development on Kubernetes. You could do this locally, and you can also do this in the cloud anywhere you want. So if you want to drop this on DigitalOcean or in EKS, now the beauty of this whole thing is the same deployment that worked locally is what's going to deploy into production. We just changed our Kubernetes configuration file to point to a different endpoint, and now we're launching into the cloud or wherever you want to launch your app. And it's all the same. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So live demo is really hard, but live demo involving using the internet is super hard. So that's a really good lightning talk. Thank you so much. And our next lightning talk is by Christina about workflow and webhooks. So please take us away.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Right before I got on stage, I texted my friend, and I was like, I'm about to do a lightning talk. Wish me good luck. And they said, oh, yeah, good luck, telling them about Lightning and how cool it is and what it does. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be talking about Lightning today. I'll be talking about workflows and webhooks. For some context, unfortunately, I am a game moderator in an MMORPG. Being an online game moderator is very hard because I am not a teenager. I have a full-time job now. I can't be in-game all the time and teach people and help them with their tickets. So for this problem, I decided to go with a modern solution. I decided I want to scan our database. Every 30 minutes or so, I want to check for new tickets. I want to push that data into a webhook in my Discord channel where all the other moderators are. And hopefully we can, track tickets without logging into the game. So this is a GIF that I took of the beginning of the process where I write some SQL in a SQL block. So I connect it to my database right here. And then I write some SQL where I select all the open player tickets from the database. So I select status equals open, and then I run the query, and my query shows up. And then I connect it to my start trigger, so it runs every day. The only issue is our data is kind of ugly right now, and there's not really a clean way for us to put this data inside a Discord thread, so this is where some Python comes in. So this is my workflow currently, and this is the first two blocks that we saw on the previous page. So if I run it again, it will still pull the SQL messages and the current open tickets. Next, I get this data and I toss it into this Python block. So I will admit I am still learning Python at the moment, but I found this really cool library called Pandas, which was really helpful in helping me figure out how to navigate this data. They have this really cool thing called a data frame, and it kind of enables you to manipulate and process data without writing like a bunch of code again. So for example, I use the sort values thing to sort by the thread ID and the timestamp of each ticket and their reply. So if I run this here, it runs all the data that I fed into this block, and then I format it in this block of the thread using pandas again, and then I format it again to put it into a Discord embed object. So we can kind of see the output here. I can show the JSON version of this too, but basically it has the username of the person, the status of the ticket, and then I do some markdown formatting here too, where I try to make it look nice and pretty for the Discord embed. So after that, I get this JSON, and I want to post it to a Discord channel. So this is a sample Discord that I have, and I have a channel called New Player Tickets. I go back here, and I click Run, and hypothetically, it should have posted to the channel, which it has. So this has been really helpful for my team in monitoring player tickets and seeing what's going on currently in game. So if something urgent happens, we can log in and help the players fix it. The only thing is that this is like not a pretty picture. So I like to do things like, let's say I want to use this dog picture as the official ticket notification system. And Discord has like a bunch of different fields you can use to customize their embed. So I just put it in the avatar URL, and the body. I run that again. Oh, you don't see the dog yet. But yeah, here's the dog. So yes, very awesome stuff. But yeah, there's like a lot of other really cool fields that you can put into JSON. So avatar URLs, the username. You can even change the color of the embed. So if I didn't want it to be like black, I can make it like hot pink or something. But yeah, yeah, that's my talk, and that's a quick little tutorial on how I, modernized our ticket flow system, and hopefully you guys found it helpful.
Thank you so much for that talk. Very, very cute, fluffy creatures make me very happy. Up next, we have Dee, who's going to be talking about their Swiss Army knife for Python, I believe was the title. Fantastic. Take it away.
Good morning, PyCon. This is my first time at PyCon. I'm also new to Python, so I basically started learning Python last year. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of my journey over the last couple of months. But I hope that you might be able to find something interesting here. So one of the ways that I like to learn is that as I read about Python or watch tutorials, I like to implement what I've learned into little, let's say, utilities that perhaps I could reuse with me in the future. And what I've started to do is group these utilities into a command that I've built to kind of help me automate little aspects of my life down the road. And just a little bit about myself, I'm not a Python developer, or I'm not a programmer. I did program fresh out of school, but now I work in corporate strategy. So if you want to talk about building businesses or finance, you can talk to me about that. But Python, I do really like. So I want to show you kind of one of my the beginnings. So I've developed this command called drz, and currently it has 3 tools in it. And if you see that second little tool there called date, that's the first kind of function I've ever built in Python. So essentially, when I work with dates, sometimes I need to work with American dates or European dates. And I've essentially built this function where it will just spit out, if you give it the EU parameter, it'll just spit out the EU version of the date, which I can then copy paste into Excel, for example. The second tool you might have seen there is called calculator. So a lot of us have desk calculators like on our desk, but sometimes when let's say I'm working with Excel and I need to do multiple calculations at once, like your Windows calculator is not always obvious when you need to use parentheses and which order you should be using parentheses. So essentially, I've developed kind of a graphing calculator so that you could just enter all of your arguments and it'll compute them in a BEDMAS kind of way. Without going to a website or finding like a graphing calculator online, I just have it quickly there on the command line. And this is a bit trickier than I anticipated in developing, just because there's a lot of logic inside BEDMAS, which kind of took me a little bit of time to figure out. Now, there's another tool that I use very frequently, and because I work in the finance department, nobody's a programmer in the finance department, and they don't know about tools like pip or source control or anything like that. So a lot of people in our team really have difficulties keeping track of like versions of files, and they often overwrite old files and things like that. So I've built a tool to essentially a quick and dirty source control for Excel files. And basically, I have this tool called increment. And essentially what it does is it will archive old versions of my Excel files in a safe directory, and it will make sure that it has a proper naming convention, like with date and version, so that essentially all the files are backed up and not lost. And now one last thing that I'm experimenting with right now. So because I work in the finance department and I work with some sensitive data and things like that, a lot of our laptops are locked down. So this is something you guys might have never seen, but this is the Wi-Fi network management kind of window. And if you look at that properties button, it has a security shield on it. So I actually have a lot of functions on my Windows system locked down, which I'm not able to access. Oh, and I just wanted to show you the tool to kind of extract the Wi-Fi password.